All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Roderick Lewis from UNC Chapel Hill, External Relations Director for University Career Services, and proud to bring you day 3 of our industry meetup networking webinar series. Today, we're going to feature the healthcare, pharma, biotech industry, and we have some great panelists here to talk about, what they do and their roles in the organization and how students can join these organizations and what they need to know. So, the purpose of today's panel really is to hear from these professionals and learn what are those in-demand skills that you as a student, need to be aware of to make yourself competitive for the various roles within these organizations, as well as, different types of tips and advice on virtual, attending virtual fairs, virtual networking events, virtual interviewing, what have you. Additionally, this discussion is very educational for people like me that work in, career services centers across the country, other professionals that are, employed in these industries, whether they're recruiters or hiring managers, as well as our faculty and administrators. So we really want to make sure that you learn and, understand how you can benefit from the knowledge that these professionals are going to impart as it pertains to supporting not only your own operations, but also the career aspirations for students across the country. But in the audience, you're on mute by default. So only the panelists will be speaking during this session, and only the videos will be displayed. I encourage you to use the Q&A button or the chat function to ask any questions that you want the panelists to answer that we may not have an opportunity to go over during this time period. We're going to, formally end the webinar at 2 o'clock. However, we always do an after party, and we will stay on, maybe an additional 10 or 15 minutes to wrap up and, get into some additional details about these organizations and recruitment tips and tactics and things that would be useful for you as a student, staff, or faculty to know. So if you're available to stay on an extra 15, 20 minutes, some of our panelists will be available to stay over, and we'll just have some additional conversations to wrap up a little later. That will all be a part of the recording, and you will receive that as well. So the webinar is recorded, so if you're registered and you're on here, you'll get a link to that recording, and then we will, you'll be able to view anything that you missed. I also just want to go over that there's always potential for technical difficulties. Most of the panelists are working from home or some other location, and so we don't have access to those redundant, networks that you have if you're working out of a corporate office. So if anybody goes down, which that's that potential they can drop off, then they will work to get back on, myself included. But the panelists that are on, they will continue the discussion. So we'll just keep it moving. So with that being said, I want to now shift to today's discussion and our panel discussion with the healthcare, pharma, biotech industry employers. And we're going to have Biogen, Humana, Merck, and Pfizer representatives speak today. And I'm going to ask these panelists to turn on the video, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves so that you understand the lens through which they speak and what they're talking about today and when they answer the questions that I have. So I'm going to start with Sarah, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and tell the audience who she is.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Sarah Thatch with Biogen, and I'm a senior recruiting partner within our pharmaceutical operations and technology division located in RTP. So I have responsibility for recruiting for our quality organization, supply chain, but then also within this group, we recruit for manufacturing, engineering, technical development, so a variety of different skill sets. So happy to be here and look forward to the discussion.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So next, we have Mara Hurd.
Hi, everyone. Mara Hurd. I am a corporate strategy lead with Humana and also serve as our campus captain for all of our UNC recruiting activities. I graduated from the MBA program in 2019, so always love talking to UNC students. I can speak to all of our programs and look forward to the conversation today.
All right, thank you, Mara. Next, we have Paul Walsh from Merck.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Walsh. I graduated from UNC back in 2012 with my PhD in chemistry. I currently work at Merck in the Pharmaceutical Sciences Division. We take the 99% pure drug substance powder and we turn it into the tablet, the inhaler, the injectable that the patient actually sees. I was an individual contributor when I first started in my career working at the lab bench and have since taken on increasing roles of responsibility. And I'm now a frontline manager, a people manager, and a director within the analytical sciences portion of pharmaceutical sciences, and work with people like Sarah to hire in new talent. And I'm also an ambassador to UNC and come back to visit the Department of Chemistry and the School of Pharmacy every year to get to know some of the students and identify new opportunities to collaborate. So looking forward to today's conversation.
All right, thank you, Paul. Last but not least, we have Andrea Daly from Pfizer.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for allowing us to join. So I'm Andrea Daly. I'm a district business manager here in what we consider Eastern North Carolina. I'm located in the Raleigh area. My district covers anywhere from High Point all the way to the coast. And I am a hiring manager in the sales division. So I cover the sales side of Pfizer in the pharmaceutical industry. And we look for people who are interested in going out into the sales aspect of the world. So I look forward to today's opportunity. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And so we're going to get started with our questions. And, the first question really is to help the audience understand this industry. What is this healthcare, pharma, biotech industry from your perspective with your organization? So, Paul, I'm going to start with you. This first question is, what core products or services is your organization built around?
Yeah, so a large global pharmaceutical company like Merck, we tend to have focus areas in different modalities for drug products, right? So we work in the areas of vaccines, of your more traditional types of medicines, like I mentioned, the tablets and injectables that patients may use either in a hospital setting or in an at-home setting. We also have embarked in the areas of biologic drug products as well. So really covering all modalities, small molecules that are made synthetically, proteins and monoclonal antibodies that are made from cell cultures, and then also vaccines as well. And a global pharmaceutical company like Merck will also try to focus in on core areas where we feel that there's opportunities for our business to grow. And for us right now within Merck, we feel that oncology is a really core area where we can continue to make strides, pairing new agents with our drug Keytruda, which is a checkpoint inhibitor and an immune modulator that helps the body use its own immunity in order to fight cancer. We also have a great history in the areas of infectious diseases and continue to make pushes in trying to develop new antibiotics as well as antiviral agents for HCV and HIV. We do like to partner with payers and folks like Humana, as well as with payers and the frontline doctors who will be able to use them, as well as patients to get to know what we think that patients might actually want or need. So those are really the major areas that we play in. And like I said, we try to be global. So, our main markets are obviously the US and Europe, but we are always looking for opportunities to be able to expand that into areas such as Japan. We're also trying to look at opportunities for us to work a little bit closer and to be able to expand in areas like China, which is obviously 1/6 of the world's population. And so if there are more effective ways that we can get some of our more innovative medicines to the patients in need, we're always looking out for those as well.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent. And so I'm going to, pass the mic next to Mara, since you mentioned Humana. So Mara, tell us about Humana. What is it built around? What are those products and services?
Sure. So Humana is primarily known as an insurance provider. That means a bunch of different things. So our primary business is, of course, Medicare Advantage. And then we also do insurance products for the military. I apologize, my dog might show up in the corner here. That's what that is. We also provide insurance products for military. We have a group or sort of employer business as well, but that's not all that we do. I think Humana is definitely going through a transformation into much more of a healthcare company and not just primarily an insurance company. So not only do we have our insurance side of the business, which is of course still the largest, we also have a huge mail order pharmacy. We have primary care clinics that we actually own. So we're also a care delivery company as well. And we also have a Humana home business. So investing in the future of care being in the home, as people want to age at home and really get some of their healthcare at home, which has, of course, only been advanced by the current situation in the United States. So I think it's an exciting company to be a part of, and we're definitely have a hand in the majority of the healthcare space, really.
Thank you. And next, I'm going to pass it to Andrea and tell us about Pfizer. So what is it built around? What are those products and services that it's built around?
Absolutely. So Pfizer is obviously a very large multinational global company. So, we have many different areas from, as you heard with Paul and Mauro, we have the research and development side, we have the manufacturing side, we have the, sales side, we have an HR side. So I'll speak more just to kind of where my area is, and that's the sales aspect of it. So when you look at Pfizer as a biopharma, biotech company, we cover a lot of therapeutic areas. We have what's called inflammation and immunology. We have a vaccines division. We have a rare disease division. We have a hemophilia division. We have an oncology division. We have institutional sales, which is in the hospital side. And then we have internal medicine, which is the division that I work in. We have over 90,000 colleagues around the world within manufacturing within 125 different countries. And then we have over 180 R&D collaborations. But more specifically in the sales side, we have many products that are on there. We're continuing to look in those areas. Our focus is innovative health, and our mission is breakthrough that change patients' lives. So we're continuing to look for, as Paul mentioned, new and therapeutic areas that we can continue to thrive in and grow, where there is unmet needs of, tablets, injectables, vaccines, to be able to help patients, with some diseases that there is nothing for them right now, as well as established. And then we also have a consumer side of just your over-the-counter consumer products. So large company, has lots of different areas, and, the sales side definitely speaks to a lot of opportunity for folks.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. And Sarah, could you tell us about Biogen? What are the products and services it's built around?
Sure. So similar to the themes we've heard so far, a global biotech company, our focus is mainly neuroscience. So MS, Alzheimer's, spinal muscular atrophy, and we really go after those rare disease states. But in terms of the pharmaceutical operations and technology division here in RTP, and also in Cambridge, where our headquarters is, if you think about anything that supports a manufacturing process, those would be the types of positions that we would recruit for. Hence the quality, supply chain, process engineers.
Yeah, and a lot of times what we were discussing earlier, people don't always associate
Right.
with the industry because they're thinking only in the name, like, oh, I'm not a researcher or scientist. And so we're definitely going to get more into that. My next question, I'm going to go back to you, Paul. And this is really to help the audience understand, EMEA, in 2020, a lot of challenges are facing with pandemic and social unrest and, economic challenges. They're really global. So not just a US thing. What are some of those top, business challenges or opportunities that are facing Merck right now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are going on right now that you alluded to, Roderick. So when, the pandemic really started hitting the United States in earnest back in March, you can see it with all of the panelists here today. Almost all of us are working from home still. So this has been 5 to 6 months now where we're trying to navigate a job that we used to do in an office and in a laboratory setting. And now we're trying to figure out, how do we do it just as effectively, even if all of us or most of us are sitting in our homes for a good majority of the time. So for somebody like myself and my team members who oversee individuals who are working in a laboratory environment, we needed to be able to find a way to figure out, how can we make sure that our office and laboratory settings are safe for them to be able to go to work. For them to be able to continue to progress the new and innovative therapies that we're working on in our clinical trials and in our laboratories to make sure that we can bring the next generations of medicines through to fruition. So that literally took weeks and months of planning and of working with our partners in facilities and our partners in HR to be able to figure out flexible work arrangements that people can have where we can continue to run the business, but also support individuals. Because probably the thing that stands out to me most being a people manager and being somebody who oversees some of the work is that we want to be as supportive as we can of the employees themselves as well. Everybody's in a difficult situation right now, and we need to be able to do whatever we can to support them. It's not a secret, and that, for us, this is obviously a huge opportunity. Like I mentioned, we have a lot of great history in the area of infectious disease, and we currently are now in a collaboration with a small tech company called Ridgeback, where we're developing now an antiviral for the treatment of the serious conditions of COVID. So people who maybe go into the hospital, or maybe as a prophylactic treatment to somebody who may have been exposed to somebody who carries the virus, to hopefully, circumvent some of the more serious consequences. So we're preparing for an emergency use authorization. And we also have 2 vaccines that are currently under development. We are way behind on that compared to some of our competitors, but we do hope that some of the platforms that we're able to use there have longer lasting effects than some of the ones that are going to be able to be made a little bit more rapidly.
Thank you. That was excellent. Thank you. And Mara, I'm going to ask you the same thing. I know you work in corporate strategy, and really interested, in the same question. What are some of those top challenges that you're facing now amid, in 2020 primarily, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that any challenge Humana is facing right now is the challenge of our customers. So being primarily an M&A, or not an M&A, an MA, Medicare Advantage business, the majority of our customers are 65 and older, and they are the ones that are at risk for COVID. So we, as a company, are facing the challenges that our customers are facing. So I think things like our customers can no longer feel comfortable going to the grocery store. So how do we get them a supply of food that is going to tide them over? They can't go out in public because they don't have access to masks. So we sent masks to all of our MA customers. So I would say our primary challenges right now are, what do our customers need from us, and it's figuring out how to do those things that aren't necessarily a traditional thing that we do, figuring out how to send food, figuring out how to send masks. That's not something Humana is used to doing. And I've really seen the company grow in our ability to focus on what the customer needs. And then beyond that, especially in my role in corporate strategy, one of our primary things is figuring out what this is going to look like long term, and what are the implications for the company, and how we need to change because of the situation. How is the healthcare industry changing? Are we going to remain mostly virtual? What kind of things do we need to pivot and have as capabilities to better serve our customers long term because of this situation? So I'd say those are our primary things. What are the challenges for our customers, and how do we solve them? And then as a company, how does this change us and our strategy moving forward?
Thank you. And Andrea, I'm going to ask you the same question. For Pfizer, what are some of those top challenges, opportunities that Pfizer is facing right now?
Absolutely, and it just echoes exactly kind of what Paul and Mara said. It's the thought of the patients and the customers, which are our healthcare professionals, and how we can be able to support them and work with them and get them the medicines they need, the information they need, the education they need throughout these times. And as far as thinking differently, working differently within that environment, and all of us aboard this call today, we've learned to embrace the technology and to be able to support them in every way that we can. So I'd say that it definitely our challenges have leaned to our opportunities, because it has really allowed us as an industry to grow, as well as just the perception of the pharmaceutical industry in general. If you think about, the environment that we're in, it takes our R&D, it takes our manufacturing. Those folks had to continue to work throughout this process and go into the places. They were well protected, and our companies all do a great job at making sure that they were safe and they put us first. I mean, that's why we're still working from home, because employees are put first. But at the same time, you know, our job is to help support patients and their medicines. And so, you know, they made sure that they put the right things in the right place. And, you know, as opportunities, it gives us areas to look into new therapeutic areas. You know, Pfizer does have a vaccines division. They are definitely looking into, you know, you'll hear it on the news that we've got some in trial as well. And not only that, it's allowed us to collaborate with a lot of the different companies. So, you know, as much as we consider to be competitors throughout this, it's allowed us to become more collaborative. And we've collaborated with a lot of different pharmaceutical companies, not only to embrace the circumstances that we're in now, but in future opportunities in different therapeutic areas to help grow and improve, you know, healthcare of people's lives. So.
Yeah, great, thank you. And Sarah, we follow up on that for Biogen. What are those top challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, of course. And I think just to build off of what everyone has already said, which has been great, you know, I think as we all adjust to work from home life from the employee side, it's had its own set of challenges, but then also opportunity. I think for us, it's really shown that people can be just as productive and engaged working from home. So that's been a really neat thing to see. I think employers are making more of an effort to really stay connected, but at the same time, as an organization and kind of going through this transition, we've had to figure out, okay, how do we effectively manage time and not overload people with meetings? So it's been an interesting evolution for sure.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And, you know, the next question I have, we're going to move more into now, you know, we've got a understanding of the business, an overview of some of these top challenges that you're facing. And now let's get into the talent section, right? So now, you know, what are the type of, you know, people that you need to help drive, you know, the business, right? To help meet these challenges that you're going to be facing 2020 and beyond. And so one of the questions I'd like to know is, you know, what majors do you typically recruit on college campuses? And I'll start off with you, Paul, on that one, just so we can get an understanding of, you know, what you may be looking for, but also just in general, what are those typical college majors that you know, Merck tends to hire for?
Yeah, so I'll speak specifically from the research and development portion, right? We're looking for anybody in the physical sciences. We're looking for anybody in the natural sciences. We hire at all levels, bachelor's, master's, and PhD level. But, you know, we do try to think creatively in terms of bringing in people with diverse backgrounds. So, you know, I mentioned I'm in an analytical sciences group that's a part of a pharmaceutical division. We don't necessarily then just hire people with degrees in chemistry, in analytical, right? We try to bring in people with backgrounds in synthetic chemistry. We try to bring in people with biology backgrounds, because it's that diversity of thought that can really be able to open up new avenues for us to be able to take our research. Sometimes, you know, I think back to a book that I read in college as a part of a history of science course. It was called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And the key theme throughout it is that in almost every field, somebody coming in who has just a completely different perspective, they can be the ones who can actually revolutionize the way that something's thinking. So really having that diversity of background and thought is really, really important.
Okay, thank you for that. And Mara, I'm going to ask you to follow up as well. What are those typical majors, college majors that Humana looks for?
Absolutely. So I would say we hire a broad range of majors. Majors don't put you in a box with Humana, just because of the scope of everything that we do. That being said, we have three primary, specifically undergrad programs that we hire for, and that's our actuarial program, and then our IT, analytics, all of those things bucket. So, and then our businesses. So that can be business majors, econ majors, public health majors, data analytics majors, math majors. We can probably find a place for you. And we also hire at all the levels as well. So lots of majors, probably the answer there, but those are our three primary programs.
Great, that's very helpful. And Andrea, with the division you work in and with Pfizer and just in general for what you're seeing, what are those typical majors that Pfizer tends to look for to support the business?
So we're the same way. We don't say that there is a scope of certain majors that we choose from. You know, In the sales side, you can be anywhere from, you know, a biology major and understanding the sciences, or a health science major, to having a marketing or business degree, you know, in the sales side. But, you know, we're very wide open. Our biggest requirement, if you're coming into a sales position, is to have just a bachelor's degree. Beyond is always, you know, that's great too, but there is no set, you know, you have to be a specific major in order to be a part of the Salesforce for Pfizer.
Great, great. I'm sure the audience would love to hear that. And Sarah, with Biogen, I know you hire for multiple units as well.
Yes.
So what are those majors that you tend to look for?
Yes, correct. And just to echo what everyone said so far, across all levels, and as I mentioned, anything that really touches a manufacturing process. So that could be a variety of different degrees within the life sciences space. So you think about any sort of manufacturing sciences or engineering, biology, chemistry, supply chain. So there are several different touch points, and definitely some transferable skills and degrees.
Great, great, great. And so following up on that question, and again, I'm gonna, you know, come back to you on this one, Paul. You know, how does your organization, you know, recruit and retain a diverse workforce? And so, you know, talking about, you know, through our campus lens, through our college recruitment mainly, what is your diversity recruitment and retention, you know, look like?
Yeah, no, it's
Go
it's an important question, and one that you know, I think, especially in light of recent social events that have been going on across the United States in the past couple of months, is one that we are continuing to put more focus and effort behind than ever before. We try to, again, reach out to a diverse set of universities, right? We want to bring in the best talent at the ground level if we can, but we do maintain connections with individuals at other, you know, partner companies, competitors, if you will, to be able to network and really bring in the best talent with, again, diverse backgrounds to be able to look at that. We do actually have metrics around making sure that we are recruiting the appropriate number of people across, you know, all different backgrounds. So that could be gender, that could be race and ethnicity, that could be LGBTQ status. When we say diversity, we mean it kind of in an all-encompassing kind of way. And then we also track that through our promotional levels as well, and try to make sure that that diversity is reflected not only at the introductory bench level, but also at the leadership level as well. And I know that some of the best executive directors and vice presidents that we have at our company have really those diverse backgrounds. But I would say, in terms of doubling down that effort, I actually have a meeting with Roderick next week to think about how we can do that a little bit better in my job as university ambassador. I'd really like for myself as a part of that recruiting process to do a better job of tapping into maybe some of those groups within college campuses that we haven't tapped into necessarily before, whether that's through fraternities, whether that's through Black or Hispanic types of student groups. We want to do a better job of reaching out to them and making sure that they're a part of the conversation.
Thank you, Paul. It's great. Sarah, I'm going to go to you as well, because I know you're directly in campus recruitment. And so what does that look like with Biogen?
Yeah, I would say similar to what Paul said, I definitely echo all of that. One of the things that we're looking at as well, just internally as a TA team, is really partnering with our hiring managers throughout the hiring process, and just making sure that they are well trained and making every single job posting that's out there, every single part of the process a competitive process, and that interview and selection, we're taking that very seriously. And we're being thoughtful about who we're putting on interview panels and the questions we're asking. So that's really an initiative, just as an internal TA function, that, you know, we're very passionate about. So.
Thank you, thank you. And I know most of your organizations, since they're very large, I know, you know, Humana, Pfizer, Merck, and Biogen have employee resource groups, and or you may call them affinity groups. Can anyone talk a little bit about, you know, those groups and how they support your campus talent acquisition, or just onboarding and retention? So Andrea, did you want to chime in on that?
Absolutely, I can definitely share that. So Pfizer being such a large company, we have what's called the CRG, and that's our colleague resource group. And those are there's a plethora of them. We have the Black community, the Global Black Community, the Pfizer Latino Group, the VIP, which is Veterans in Pfizer, Pfizer Hispanic, Global Asian Alliance, Women's Field Network, so a diversity of LGBT. We have a wide variety of these folks, and what these groups do is, as both an employee, you can be a part of these groups, and what they do is, this is an example where they'll go out, and not only do they do things within the company and to help keep engagement within these groups together as far as WebExes, charity services, things like that, but they are a large part in the recruiting process. So they set up events in their individual groups, reaching out to campuses and universities across globally to be able to help recruit within that, because it helps to kind of facilitate different opportunities and diverse opportunities. So it is a very big resource group, and Pfizer is very devoted to it. Equity is one of our core values. We have 4 core values within our company, and we're really making sure, just as Paul said, we're leaning on these colleague resource groups to help with the recruitment and bringing in of a diverse background, because we too have metrics where we want to ensure that we are being equitable across the board.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on that before I move on? Because there's always one we can stay on a long time, because it's so interesting, in light of recent events, especially. So, with Mara, with Humana, we had the pleasure of having Chris Johnson about a month and a half ago, and he spoke a lot about the diversity initiatives and with Humana, and just very impressive. But if you want to add anything, because he added a lot, so but I'll give you the mic. So.
Sure. I would just add that, we call them network resource groups. Different, same thing, different names. And I would just add the point that, as involved as they all are with recruiting, you think about strong networks like that and what they can do for you once you start your career. So things like mentoring circles and having sponsors and companies through network resource groups. It's just a really great thing to be involved in. So it's just a quick plug for wherever you end up. Network resource groups, or whatever they're called at different companies, are just a really great thing to be involved in. And that's just a post-grad plug.
No, thank you. That's a great plug. It's definitely a great benefit. And I know that organizations are doing a lot more to promote those and use those in terms of helping to support not only improvement of their workplace culture and workplace this kind of engagement, but also to attract and retain diverse talent. So it's good to hear. And Andrew, you said something earlier, so going back, we talked about COVID-19 and just the impact. All of you spoke of how it impacts your organizations. One question that I know a lot of students tend to be concerned about is how's your organization going to manage remote jobs versus in office or field-based types of jobs. So what does that look like? What are you thinking about going forward in the future, Paul? I know you spoke at length about this too, Paul, in terms of the challenges that you faced these prior 6 months. What does that look like in 2021 for the next crop of students that would be looking for internships and full-time jobs?
Absolutely, it's a great question. Pfizer every day is evaluating the situation and what is going on, and we have a whole team working on how that looks for all our different divisions. As I mentioned earlier, our manufacturing R&D, they're in the labs, they're in the manufacturing facilities, moving forward in that process, and they continually need people recruiting in those jobs and filling those areas. Where other divisions like sales, we're currently working from home, but there's a process they're following that in bits and pieces around our nation, some representatives are out into the field interacting with customers again. So it is something that is on the forefront every single day. We get updates weekly as to where it's kind of a huge process, but it looks as is the safety of a state, the government's decisions. Are the customers ready for interactions with, face-to-face, in-office employee type stuff? And then putting to the forefront the PPE. That was one of the first things when we got pulled from the field, that Pfizer ensured that every single employee had the proper PPE equipment, regardless if you were currently at home and you didn't know when you'd be able to be out into your office setting or into your field setting, to those that were, on the front lines doing what they needed to do, that they had the proper equipment. So it is something that, do we know what it's going to look like in 2021? We can't say that we do right now. We kind of take it on a weekly basis based on, how they're evaluating everything of the safety of their employees, the safety of the environment, the customers, the hospital systems, and being respectful to the the systems as well. So we want to make sure that we're not overstepping our boundaries, even though they may feel that we're good. Are the hospital systems, are the healthcare, are the R&Ds, are they allowing the opportunities to interact? But I will say, all in all, just the advancements in technology to keep us connected. I don't think this is something that's going to go away, even if we do go back. It is a great opportunity, as we all see healthcare providers using telemedicine and things like that, that this is a space that will continue to evolve in the virtual world, as well as in-office, in-person interactions.
Thank you, Andrea. And Paul, I'll jump to you on this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say especially for students who are thinking about either going out for a summer internship coming up in, summer of 2021, typically those would open up for applications in the winter timeframe, at least at Merck, to begin to prepare for the upcoming summer, as well as those who are going to be graduating sometime over the course of the next year. Is that your job in terms of trying to figure out how to interact with future employers just got that much harder, because we're not going to be able to physically go to conferences, we're not going to be able to physically go to job fairs. So we're all trying to get used to what this is going to look like. I'm going to be attending with some of my colleagues at the STEM Career Fair coming up in mid-September at UNC. We are trying to engage with the virtual career fairs. So the big thing that is also on the forefront of my mind, because I've got 2 new people coming on board that we just recently hired that have onboarded in the last 2 months, is how do I get them ingratiated in the culture and in the broader context of working at Merck? Because all of a sudden it became so much more formal, where I can't just walk down the hallway and introduce somebody to somebody else. I have to set up a WebEx, and we have to make sure it works with everybody's calendars, and it feels so much more formal, and you don't get that personal interaction of shaking somebody's hand, looking them directly in the eye, or having a coffee with them literally in the same space. So I think the thing we have to continue to think about and evolve as we work through these situations is, how can we maintain that personal connection? And how can we maintain that sense of collaboration? Because where we're really losing out is not necessarily on the hardcore things, because like I said, we still have people going to the lab doing what we need to do to support the pipeline. But it's those hallway conversations. It's those ideas that come out of just lunch conversations and natural things that come up over the course of a workday that we're really losing out on, and that I think is going to come to fruition over the course of time. So we need to come up with more creative ways of still being able to get people to connect with one another.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah, you have anything to add to that?
Now, very similar to what I was saying before. It's an interesting dynamic, because I feel like everybody's very eager to stay more connected, but then it's how do we balance too many meetings on the calendar and making sure that people feel supported at home, but also that we're not spinning our wheels maybe with meetings and such that aren't as productive. So it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. And Mara, what about Humana? What's that kind of balance of the in-person versus remote? Because students are thinking about that, right? And it's just like the on-campus, like students like, oh, when I go to school, I want to be on campus, but then some like, hey, I'm fine with online, I'm fine with remote. But how do you strike that right balance?
Yeah, I think Humana was learning into being flexible before all of this happened, and now the importance of that has just gotten more. But I would say that we're being really intentional about the way that we're approaching the virtual, so that we try and get as much of the culture in there as possible. So my team onboarded 5 interns and 3 new hires over the course of the last 2 months, and we will have learned a lot by the time we're virtually onboarding other people. So I think it is a balance, and there, like we mentioned, there's teams at Humana working on what this balance looks like in the future, and what does the timing need to be, and do we want to give added flexibility for work at home in the future? And there's ongoing conversations, but I think you can learn a lot about a company from their ability to be flexible. So I would add it into your sort of checkbox of what you're looking for in a company, because I think the companies that have been able to, care for their employees and be flexible and learn into this and are doing a really good job are really great companies. like the ones that we have represented here. So I would add it to your checkbox of things to look for in a company moving forward, is how they're handling this and what the future looks like.
It's interesting that you say that, because it's actually a good segue into my next question. But those things now do become the new normal, a new expectation, right? In terms of, not even a benefit, but just an expectation. Like you said, hey, just the safety of this focus on, workplace, working remotely. If that's needed, then it's fine. But it's no longer, oh, can I do it? It's like, hey, this is just part of the business now. It's part of working now. So it's not so much a differentiation. And so my next question, Paul, is to you. And, some of the things I've been hearing, we've talked about, flexibility, we've talked about culture. And so, all these different types of skills that you will be looking for in the next, group of talent that you onboard into your organization. What are those in-demand, both technical and behavior skills that are highly valued in Merck? So,
Yeah.
I know there's different, there's these micro cultures within the corporate culture.
Sure.
As much as you're a lifer at Merck, so you are Merck. So,
Yeah.
what are those in-demand, technical and behavior skills that really impress you with the college recruit?
Yeah. So in terms of technical skills, for me, what I'm looking for when I'm interviewing somebody, again, regardless of what level it is, whether it's at the BS level, MS, or PhD, is the thought process of how do you use science, right? So I'm, again, coming from a perspective of somebody in R&D, I want somebody who can think critically, right? We can train you on how to do whatever job it is that you come in to do. And not to mention, you're not going to be stuck in one place either, right? You're going to be able to move around to different parts of the business, do rotations in other departments, maybe even find other full-time opportunities in different parts of the business. So we can train somebody on how to do any individual job. Just have that core background on how to think about and utilize the scientific method and ultimately apply it and be a critical thinker. Ask really good questions. But the bigger thing that I think about when I begin to look at my team and when I do recruiting is I'm looking at somebody, were they actually collaborative? So when, especially somebody comes and gives a seminar, is it all me, I, or is it, oh, I did this with my partner down the hall in this lab, and I couldn't have done this without so-and-so who brought, this other technique, and it really rounded out our story and made it overall better. So that element of collaboration, because, the vast majority of these companies are very, very large, and we need to be able to work together, because at the end of the day, we can accomplish a whole lot more together than we can individually working, in parallel with one another. I would also then just say, just overall soft skills, or, well spoken. Can you really well communicate what it is that you're trying to get across, both with the verbal word as well as in written form? And are you somebody that people are going to get along with? And you can figure that out pretty quickly and easily through a 30-minute phone call interview, or, more importantly, probably an interview process with an interview panel. If we get that feeling that you may be difficult to work with, or that you may not play well in the sandbox, that's going to put you a little bit behind the eight ball. So really think about, as you're working in your labs and in your classes at UNC, think about how you're working with others, because it's not just about what you accomplish, it's about what you accomplish with your teammates, because you can do a whole lot more together.
I love that, Paul. It reminded me of this Harvard study, I don't know how long ago, maybe 10 years ago. It was called Lovable Fools or Competent Jerks. Who'd you rather work with? It's really like this 4-grid. I can't remember the other two, but it basically came down to, with people, because it was like a star employee, and it's where everybody wants to work with the nice person who's a star employee too. So it was like a no-brainer. Then it was just an employee who was a jerk, and they were incompetent. And they said, well, of course, nobody wants to work with that person. So you just take out the extremes, and what you had left were the lovable fools, the incompetent jerks, or the competent jerks. So it said, well, yeah, you don't really want to work with the competent jerk. Even though they're competent, you can't work with them, right? And so you tend to avoid them, and you're less productive. But the lovable fool, yeah, that person's not going to get that much done, but they're so lovable. They're so nice, and they at least add some value to the day. So they make you feel good, and you just know what you get with them. But they're not disruptive as in the same way as the competent jerk. You may be thinking that. So Sarah, I'm going to go to you next on this one, and it talks about Biogen. What are those in-demand technical and behavior skills that you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paul, that was very well said. So to follow up to that, might be tough. But as I think about our core values here at Biogen, some of the similar themes that Paul mentioned: pioneering, inclusive, ethical, customer focused, accountable. We try to incorporate all of those values into our interview and selection process, and making sure that we're really asking questions that would draw that type of behavior out of the candidates that are interviewing. So I would say those would probably be some of the top sort of themes to think about.
That's great. Yep. Love it. And so, and then you put your questions in terms of when you're doing your talent selection. What is it? Are you looking, from the application resume standpoint? You're doing like a first screen for some things you can,
Yeah, I would say that, and then probably more so at the interview level. And I had mentioned we're really trying to work with our hiring managers to make sure that their interview process is efficient and competitive, and we're looking for the right talent and skill set. So I would say those types of questions are probably more drawn out during the actual interview process. But in terms of a resume, there are ways that you can put that on a resume as well. Specific examples of projects that you've worked on, or any leadership opportunities that you've taken on in your classes. Those are all things that would definitely stand out on a resume.
Okay, thank you. And Andrea, same question. What are those in-demand technical and behavior skills that are highly valued at Pfizer, whether it's in your division or just as a corporate?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And we kind of follow our core values, which are joy, excellence, equity, and courage. So, when you think about those, when you kind of lump those 4 different groups, it's, especially in the sales side, right now in the environment we're in, are you change agile? Can you, and be efficient and effective in it? Can you go from one thing to the next and be open-minded about it? Strategically thinking, again, it's a different way of doing a business, and it doesn't matter if you're sales side or a different side of Pfizer. How are you going to look at the business and strategically think of a way to interact with customer support, things like that. Collaborative is definitely a thing. You work with multiple people. As I said, we work with other companies. So, that collaboration, anything you can show where you've done team effort and leadership skills as well, I think is extremely important, as well as communication skills. I mean, when you're talking sales side, it's how do you present yourself? How do you speak? How do you write? More so in this virtual environment, it's a lot different. We went from being in the face-to-face with interacting with our customers to now sometimes we're calling on a phone, and that was a change of, an adapt that we had to make. So, and I'd say the last thing is the joy, to be a part of it. Right now, we have to be very empathetic, and you have to show that you have that side of you too. Everybody always thinks when you're talking about sales side, you got to have this burning competitive desire in you. And necessarily when it comes to what the type of sales that we're in, we're more here to help support and help patients and educate than it is kind of like a tough competition type sales idea. So I would say that those probably are the biggest, and they all kind of fall within those 4 core areas. And that's really when you're working with HR and working with a hiring manager in a sales role, those are kind of the 4 buckets where we formulate questions. So any types of examples that you can demonstrate with any of those would really help benefit.
I love it, love it. And Mara, what about Humana?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say first that the technical piece is going to vary widely between like our IT side of the house and our business side of the house. But everything that everybody said is incredibly relevant, especially critical thinking, being able to answer questions in a very thoughtful way. And that shows that you've been curious about the healthcare industry and the different directions that it could go, I think is important. And then our values are, of course, important, and then guide, of course, our interview questions. So inspire health, cultivate uniqueness, rethink routine, pioneer simplicity, and thrive together are just a different way to say all of the different values that everybody has mentioned, of being able to work in a team, work collaboratively. And then one thing I would add to what everybody else has mentioned is, across all of our programs, being able to articulate why you want to work in healthcare is really important. It's a choice that you're making, especially in what we're dealing with right now. There's everybody has a very personal reason. And I think it's something that across our company, we really look for is, why are you interested in healthcare? Why do you want to get up every day and care for people, and really, you know, cater to people in some of the best and worst times of their lives? So I would definitely say anybody on this call, be able to articulate why you want to work in healthcare, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's the insurance space. There's definitely a people care piece to all of that. So that's a key answer that you're probably going to be asked.
No, thank you. Thank you. And I love that statement, the pioneer simplicity. So I'm going to start using that. I love that. So Paul, I'm going to come back to you. So this next question, and as I told you, time just flies by. So we have 10 minutes left until 2 o'clock. But let's get the audience the blueprint. So for the students in the audience who want to work for Merck, if you just had to coach somebody and say, hey, here's what you do. If you want to work at Merck, you need to do this, this, and this. What is that? What would you tell the students to be successful, to at least be able to get an interview?
Yeah. Be really diligent, focus in, and do a really good job in your classes. Right. We do, as a matter of fact, check transcripts as we're going through, and we do request those. So we think about, have you taken those seriously? Do you see an evolution in how somebody approaches it? Make sure that in all of the work that you're doing, you're thinking about how can you do it collaboratively. Again, you know, any team project, something like that, don't look at it as, you know, something where somebody could be dragging you down. Look at it as an opportunity to prepare yourself for working in the real world, and be willing and ready to do a lot of hard work in terms of the job search process. It is long, it is hard, it is grueling. I'm remembering back to 8 years ago when I first graduated. So I'm probably the worst person to give advice on how to get a job, because I've only ever really gotten one job, and then I just got, you know, promotions and new opportunities because of it. But through that process, I submitted probably 50 applications, and, you know, went to different career fairs and job fairs at conferences and places. And I refined my skills through that process. Right. And all of a sudden, then when it came time for me to do my on-site interview at Merck, my hand was a little less sweaty. I stuttered a little bit less, right? I was a little bit more confident walking through that process. So be prepared for a lot of no's. Be prepared to put your nose to the grindstone and put in the work, and use all the platforms that are at your disposal, right? LinkedIn, you know, virtual job fairs and postings. Don't shy away from any of them. And all the things that we talked about in terms of all those soft skills that everybody very eloquently talked to, make sure that you've got good tangible examples of how you can talk about them during your interview process.
Perfect. Great. And Andrea, I'm going to jump to you next. So if you were coaching the student on how to get an interview at least at Pfizer, what would you tell that student? What's the blueprint for that student to get an interview, or to increase the likelihood that they could get an interview?
Sure. You know, I would have to say, again, I'll just speak as if they were coming into Pfizer. So know what role you want to take, know what position you want to do, and do some research on it. Truly understand, like, do you understand what sales looks like? Do you understand what R&D looks like? And really take the time to dig in. To what Paul mentioned, you know, lean on resources, network as much as you can. If you know somebody in the industry, even if it's not with the particular company you want, lean on them. Ask them what the job is like. Ask them the pros and cons. You want to know the whole spectrum coming in. And continue to kind of lean on, you know, LinkedIn's a great thing. If there's a certain company or a certain thing that you want to do, you know, reach out. I know all of us here on the call, and even more so, are always willing to help and support, and don't be afraid. That's the one thing, is don't be afraid to reach out, because people, you know, when you show the persistence and you show that you have the drive and you want to do it, that's where you're going to grow your network. You're going to continue to communicate. You're going to try to reach out. And then just be prepared, you know, be ready for anything. As Paul said, you know, sharpen your interview skills and make sure that you're prepared. But to really kind of get that first interview, I would say, know the business, whoever you can connect with, and use the platforms that are out there to try and connect. And then once you get that, it's where you're kind of on the stage to promote yourself. And if you're doing all the right things that you are in your classes and throughout your time on the campus, then that's your time to shine once you've nailed that interview.
Thank you, Andrew. And Sarah, at Biogen, so you have to walk the student through. You're going to tell them, hey, you do this, this, and this. You're going to increase the likelihood of getting an interview at Biogen. What would you tell that student?
Yeah, and I think everybody's done a great job of explaining. So just to add to that, continue to do your research on the jobs that you're applying to. So be intentional and thoughtful about your background and your qualifications and how that aligns with the job description. It probably goes without saying, but make sure that your resume is neat and organized and you can speak to projects and examples that you've done or you've led. And then really leveraging, those social media outlets, LinkedIn, send invites to recruiters that you find. Really don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. And I think something that Paul really sort of honed in on and really hit home, and I wanted to just stress that too. Don't get discouraged if you aren't getting immediate callbacks. For whatever reason, it can be for a variety of different situations, but just don't get discouraged because that job will come up and will land in your lap. So if you don't get an immediate callback, that's pretty normal for this environment these days, I would think. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Sarah. And just to give people context, I'm currently suffering through a backlog of 100 emails.
Yes.
And so I'm not a recruiter, but I can imagine if I were, how many emails. So take that into consideration as well. And even for our business managers, they get a lot of just emails from their stakeholders. So don't always look at a failure to have a quick response as a rejection. So, Mara and Humana, so what would be that blueprint that you tell a student how they should approach their job search to get an interview at Humana?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything, of course, this is the benefit of going last. Everything that everybody has said to this point is very relevant. Another opportunity, or just don't miss the opportunity to tell us that you're interested. And I think just a good rule of thumb is don't let your interview be the first time that you've talked to somebody at Humana. I think being on this is a great start. And then if you get access, email me. I can, even if you're not interested in corporate strategy, I'm interested in UNC students. And so I want to make sure that I connect you with somebody that you can talk to. And I think you've missed a big opportunity if your first actual conversation with somebody at Humana is your interview. So I'd say that's just a pro tip for interviewing, something I learned later in life than I should have. So that's one thing I would say. And don't hesitate to just ask questions, anytime you have an opportunity like this or at a career fair, always show up with questions because you can always be learning about little insider tips, different people you need to talk to get jobs. So never miss an opportunity to interact with Humana and tell us that you're interested.
That's excellent. And, we have about 3 minutes before, we formally, close or end this portion of the webinar that we'll continue with the panelists who will stay on. I know, Mara, you have a hard stop at 2, and I know some audience members may have a hard stop at 2. So I'm going to continue with you and ask this final question just for the formal part of the webinar. What are those expectations that you have for students engaging with you at these, virtual career fairs, right? So we just, this virtual space. What would you be looking for? What would you be expecting, from these students in this virtual space?
Don't show up and ask us what we do. I think if you're interested in a company at a career fair, make a list of the ones you're interested in and have at least look up their primary business and what they do and the industry they're in. I've seen some big flops on that one. So don't show up and have your first question be like, oh, what does Humana do? Have a little bit more informed questions than that. You don't have to go super deep, but that's just sort of a landmine I don't want anybody to step in. So that would be one thing. And I actually don't have a hard stop at 2. I can hang out for a little bit.
Okay, good. And so then I'll put that question to you now, Paul, as well. So, we're thinking about these upcoming, because you will be participating in our fairs. So I'm looking forward to having you there. So what are those expectations that you're going to be looking for in this virtual format?
Yeah, no, I think Maura hit it on the head. Come prepared. Come prepared with your resume, a polished one ready to go. Come prepared with some questions, some thoughtful ones to be able to ask, and come prepared being able to talk about the things that you did both technically as well as from a soft skills perspective that are going to make you stand out compared to the other students who we're going to be meeting with on that day.
Great, great. And I'll rotate around to Andrea. So what expectations would you have if you're participating in the fair? What would you be expecting students to do in this virtual space?
That's exactly right. Everything that Paul and Amara had said is what's to be expected. One tip advice, and just think about your overall presentation, even if it's in a virtual environment. The best thing to do, make sure that you're dressed for success, even in a virtual world. Make sure your background is looking right, because that shows that you're really committed. And it's sometimes the simple things that we overlook. You think, okay, I've got my resume ready, I got my questions ready, but it could be as simple as, people looking at in the recruiting too, how prepared did they really prepare themselves physically and mentally? So just making sure that all of that is into play as you're, approaching an interview or just the process of interacting virtually. Because I can tell you, Pfizer, even before COVID, we started off our interview process with virtual WebExes. So that is always something that will continue. But again, then I echo everything that Mara and Paul said regarding, being prepared and making sure you know the company, know the job as best you can. You don't have to go too detailed, but having a good, decent understanding.
Okay. Well, with that, it's 2 o'clock, so I'm going to, formally thank all of our panelists. And I believe it was Sarah that had a hard stop. I may have been mistaken, so my apologies. But I do want to thank you also, Sarah. Thank you for just staying on just so I can thank you. And I know the audience members want to thank you as well. And we're going to do this again. And so for audience members, if you have to log off, don't worry, all of this will be recorded. So we're going to stay on a few minutes later just to continue some discussions. But let's just give a round of applause, virtual round of applause to Sarah from Biogen, Andrea from Pfizer, Mara from Humana, and Paul from Merck. Thank you all, and we're going to continue conversations. Bye, Sarah. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
All right.
Good to meet you, Sarah.
Good to meet you too. Bye-bye.
So now it's time for the after party. So let's continue some of these great discussions. You guys hit on a lot of things I'd love to follow back up on, and really talking about your workplaces. And workplace culture is something that I think a lot of students are going to be really paying more attention to now more than ever. A lot of CEOs, a lot of executives have really taken a stance on a lot of these social issues that are now taking place just within the country, everywhere. Even with the pandemic, how you treat, I think Mara, I think you may have said it, and Paul and all of you echoed it, how you are responding to that in terms of how you treat your employees, or that perception of, safety and risk to your employees, people would be taking that into consideration. What are some things, Paul, I'll start off with you, that you're proud about that Merck is doing in this space, as it pertains to its position on some of these social issues, and also, health, the health pandemic as well?
Well, I'm going to start at the top of the company. So for those of you who don't know, the CEO of Merck, his name is Ken Frazier. He is a Black man. He's a lawyer, formally trained. And to me, he is, the cornerstone of a lot of that in terms of promoting a culture within the company of not only diversity, but I think the more important portion of that is inclusivity, right? It's one thing to hire a diverse workforce that represents the diverse culture that we have within the United States of America. It's another one to then actually have those voices truly be heard as a part of the overall conversations. Because a lot of the time, people, once they come on board, can very much feel marginalized, especially as we're still working through the process of overcoming what the president of MRL, quite frankly, just said was white privilege, right? We didn't have to necessarily, I myself as a white person have never had to think about a lot of those things. And I haven't really necessarily had to seriously consider diversity in all of its forms through the recruiting process. And that is the definition of white privilege. And so I think the other thing that we need to be constantly thinking about, and that I'm hopeful that we'll continue to do a better job on, is really that inclusivity portion. And that once we bring that diverse workforce to the four walls of Merck, that we really make sure that they feel like they are a part of everything. That's not to say that we don't do a good job of it now, but I think we can always do better. And I'm looking forward to September, because that's Diversity and Inclusion Month within Merck. And we have a number of things that we're doing over the course of that month to better, approach it more directly and make people think about it on a day-to-day basis. Because like I said, for somebody like me, I have the privilege of not necessarily having to think about it on a daily basis. And I'm hopeful that these things will bring to the forefront and bring to the light that will be better if we all do think about it more thoughtfully.
Thank you for that. It's very interesting. Okay. And Mara, I'll go to you next. Same question. What are those things that you're just proud about that humanity is doing in this space, with all that's going around with, the health pandemic and also, social injustice and this, these twin pandemics, as it were. Looks like you're on mute, Mara.
I am.
There you go.
I think I'll just speak broadly to what I've seen as a very large company that is incredibly willing to be introspective, admit that we can do things differently and better, and then pivot and do so. I've worked at companies in the past that I didn't feel were willing to pivot or even willing to have the conversations. And it's something that I've seen top down, bottom up of conversations happening, needing to get food to our members, and we just made that happen. Or let's send masks to everybody. How do we do that? No idea. Let's make that happen. Send them to associates too. So have my Humana masks and wear them proudly. But I think I've just been really impressed with our willingness to talk about things and pivot and do things and make things happen and work harder, work longer hours, and really do things with our customer and our associates in our mind first, and what those needs are that we can address, even if it's not in our traditional things that we do as a business, adding new things all the time. And I think I've just been really impressed with our willingness to do things, our doing things, and then talking about things. We get weekly emails from our CEO, and they're really open and honest, and we have really good conversations as a company. So I think I've just been impressed with our willingness to change. I think it's been really impressive.
Thank you. And Andrea, same question. So what are those things that you're impressed about that Pfizer is doing in this space? Amid the social unrest, the social injustice, this focus on structural racism, and of course COVID-19 is causing massive disruptions everywhere, in all facets, right? Health, economy,
Absolutely.
race, the whole 9 yards. So
it sure does. And I have to echo, from what has transpired, Pfizer took it right away and started out and put a call out to the entire, each division had their own call with their own leaders. We had our CEO, Albert Bourla, who is, native to Greece. And it is something we had a call just a couple weeks ago that they actually gave us the percentages across when I've shared those different CRG groups, women in leadership, the Black community, what percent they own are a part of the company, the Pfizer Latino, the veterans. They really are trying to increase, and the percent is very low in a lot of these groups, and they've brought it to the forefront, and they've recognized it, and they continue to recognize. But they've also encouraged these CRG groups is anybody can be involved. I'm involved in about 4 of them, and I think the best thing is the learning, and that's what Pfizer's really put to the forefront is, no matter what background you are, you can be a part of any of these groups. And the main thing is to learn and understand each one of these. And so we can all be one culture, and it's going to take us a long time to get the process, get to people understand and get to the numbers we need to get to make sure that it is a full equality across the board when you're talking about a diverse background. But I can see within the past couple of years, we've gained in some areas, and now with the recent interactions that have transpired, it's even more so to the forefront. So these groups are growing, and their percentages are growing within the company and our recruiting process and everything. And then when you look at the health pandemic side of it, how the company just supports, even looking across different, right away, pharmaceutical companies, we were helping those on the front lines regardless, supporting in those areas, whether it was supplying equipment or helping with medicines, regardless of your diversity background. If you could not have transportation or you could not have anything, we were making sure that we were supporting in all areas. And we continue to have monthly calls to make sure that we are educated on this information and have a better understanding, and that we're all doing our own equal parts to make everything inclusive.
Yeah, I just want to build off of that because I think Andrea makes a really good point, and Mauro made it a little bit earlier about what Humana has been doing to help out with the pandemic, right? You think about the people who are on this call and the industries that we work in, right? Insurance and big pharma, politicians, others, right? We can be the boogeyman to them a lot, but a company is nothing more than a large group of individuals and people, and individuals and people more often than not want to do good whenever they possibly can. So hearing about Humana, an insurance, primarily an insurance company, going out and delivering meals to people. Merck donated, 8 million masks, surgical masks, and countless, gloves to local hospitals in the New Jersey area at the height of the pandemic here. So, when I just think about those things, as well as, some of the programs that Merck has in terms of being able to donate your time while you're working. We give people up to 40 hours a year that they can volunteer at a nonprofit company during work hours. And some of those things, I think those can also be core to a culture of some of those companies, and giving back is a big portion of that.
That's great. And, building on what you said, Andrea, earlier as well, and talking about how do you build that inclusive culture, right? How do you build that culture where, you can have all these micro cultures, but how do you build that company culture where people all buy into that vision, right? And so they bring their differences, their experiences, but they feel like they're part of the solution, right? They feel like they're part of the team. And I think, I think there are a lot of things we can learn from your high functioning sports teams. So I tend to look at those teams and see, like, how do you bring all these collections of individuals like Paul talked about, but there's that trust, right? So I always go back to that trust in the organization, trust in the coach, that they're going to find a way to make sure that you're represented in that overall vision of how business gets done, right? And if you trust it and buy into it, that's like the holy grail, right? And like you said, Andrea, I mean, it's a marathon, it's a work in progress. It's more of an ideal, right? I don't even know if you actually get there, because I don't know if there's any time in history where you can point to, where they actually was working like that, right? So you're constantly, it's like trying to say, we're going to end poverty, we're going to, sickness, like, you can strive to, but I mean, it's constantly evolving, right? And so that's fine. That's what makes, us as individuals unique, in these corporations like your, pharma, healthcare, biotech companies that, have to deal with this on the front line even more so. So last question to each of you, and it's just to humanize, our discussion. So over the past several months, how have you personally just been impacted with having to work from home? We were joking earlier before we started. I told you, for me, it's been a big shift because I have to, watch out for my kids, trying to Zoom bomb me, and I've got to negotiate and figure out ways to make sure they don't, come into my little makeshift office space. But beyond that, I've gotten into different things that I didn't make time to do before, right? So there's a lot of positives I've experienced. Alluding to what you said earlier, Mara, I believe you talked about, all of you, I think, alluded to that, Paul, as well, that in-person office experience that you miss. But then the things I've had more, opportunity to spend more time with my kids, right? There was all this time that I didn't think I had, like, oh, now I have it. So I've gotten into new sports, just different things that probably would not have gotten into. So it's kind of up, down, good and bad. So what's it been like for you, Paul, these past several months, just from a person?
Tough. So a couple of things about me. I'm a dad of twins. They are turning 2 in October. So when the pandemic first hit, really here in the United States, obviously our daycare center closed down. So my wife and I, both of whom, my wife also works for Merck, we were trying to juggle our full-time jobs on top of taking care of our toddlers, who obviously have some needs of their own. We did end up inviting one of their teachers from the daycare in to help us out during the day. So that was super beneficial and helpful. But I myself, I also, I'm a patient as much as I am a healthcare provider. I suffer from anxiety and depression. So there was, some of that I had to deal with personally in terms of coping with, a very anxiety-ridden situation that we're going through right now. And I had to overcome my own limitations in terms of what impact can I have in a particular situation. I had to build trust with the people who I work with on my team, my colleagues, my bosses. And I would say I've learned a lot about myself through that process. And I think they are things that I'm going to be able to carry with myself into throughout my career. Right? A true measure of somebody is how do they react when something doesn't quite go the way that one would expect. And I think there were some things that I definitely could have done better when this all first happened. But hey, that's a part of a learning experience, right? Failure is nothing more than an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to do better next time.
No, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Mara, what about you?
Sure.
Oh, I thought you
I
were
think,
mute, I'm sorry.
no, we're good. I think the first thing I learned is that I'm a workaholic, so I had no boundaries at the beginning of this. I feel like I didn't stop working for the first 3 months of this experience. And then I've learned that I can set boundaries, and I probably should. So that's something I've learned. I'm also planning a pandemic wedding, so that's exciting and new and different. Personalize the experience a little bit. We'll see how that goes. I've learned I like working at home, so I hope I get to sort of carry part of this movement now that I've set boundaries and I don't work until all hours of the night anymore. I really like working at home. But I miss my colleagues. So I'm hoping maybe we come up with some sort of stays at home working balance moving forward. Something I've taken out of it, but it's been an interesting experience.
I echo that. I'm in the same boat with you. So I actually feel like I've worked more and longer hours since the pandemic. So and I don't get any bonuses for that. So that's like, Andrea, what about you? How's this whole past several months just impacted you personally?
So I agree 100%. I mean, I feel like I've worked harder now than I did when I was, driving over half of the state of North Carolina. As a mother of 3, and my oldest was in 1st grade, when it first hit, it was a challenge because I was trying to do homeschool and, balance my work, and I managed 10 different representatives. So they wanted my time because they were home, and, you've got a lot of people pulling. So I thought I was good with time management. I've learned to be more effective in time management because you can easily put in a lot of time when you're at home thinking you don't shut down. But you need to have that balance. And I will give Pfizer a lot of credit. When we first came out, they put employees first, and they told us, you take 2 hours out of your day. If it's helping a child, if it's helping a parent, if it's helping a neighbor, give yourself 2 hours to just break away and get away from the computer system. So it took me a while to learn that. And I eventually learned I had to put it into my calendar of my hour break so I would get that. But I feel like now that I've adapted to it, it's really helped kind of benefit me as far as my time management. And moving forward, I still do miss the interactions though. And I can tell you for my team, who's a sales team, who's used to interacting, talking to people, engaging into people. Sure, we're doing it virtually and we're getting a taste of it, but it is not the same when you're standing across from somebody and you're educating them, or you're hearing success stories about patients who have done really well on medicines that your company has provided. So we do look forward to the opportunity. I can say every day when I talk to one of my representatives, they're biting at the bit to get back to the normal, what normal will look like as time moves forward. But we've all adjusted, and that's why I mentioned earlier, change agile is so important, because when that day comes, it's going to be different again. It's not going to be to what we were used to, but it's going to be different than what we're doing now. So I'd say, of course, we all have those times, as you said. I hope none of the kids came barging in today, and thank goodness they didn't. But the flexibility of our company is allowing us an understanding, and I think is what's most important. We're being productive for our companies, but they're being understanding to our work-life balance.
That's great. Thank you. I think this really helps people in the audience to understand, you're human, and so your panelists, you presented, great information today, but also you're human and you're dealing with a lot of the same challenges that our students are dealing with, faculty, staff. I mean, we're people first, right? It's all are impacted by this pandemic, and you represent organizations that are really on the front line of bringing potential treatments or cures, and so it's very important to just your mental health and how you're doing it, just how you feel supported by your family and your organizations. So final question, and then we're bringing it to a close. So I'll go back to you, Paul. What do you want the audience to take away from this webinar?
That's a great question. that there's no magic bullet to getting a job, and that exactly what you just said, you know, the people that you're going to be reaching out to, they're all human. There's no one thing that you can do besides, you know, I think most uniquely being yourself that is going to set you apart. You know, I've been trying to look through and help out with some of the Q&A that are coming through. And, you know, I see a lot of people worrying about, well, am I doing enough? You know, I think that's a perfectly natural worry. But if you're doing something that speaks to you and that you think is going to have an impact, and where you think you can bring something unique to the table, that is enough. And just make sure that that comes through as you're beginning to look towards the next stages of your career.
Thank you. Mara, same question. What do you want the audience to take away from this webinar today?
Sure. I would love for everyone to take away that virtually or not, networking is big. Don't miss opportunities. We're all human and deal with dogs in the background of virtual meetings. But don't miss opportunities to network. It's really, I think my time is freed up. I can network with students more now that I'm virtual, and there's always an opportunity to have a phone call, have a video chat. So definitely take advantage of those opportunities. One other thing, these are a couple questions I saw in the Q&A. First, if there's an opportunity to write a cover letter and it's optional, write the cover letter. Second thing was how to present yourself on virtual interviews. Treat it like it's a normal in-person interview. Suit, make sure your background is clean, and show up early. Be the first person on that meeting, and make sure that everything is quiet. Will be my quick little virtual interview, and always write a cover letter, always.
Thank you.
Sort of pieces of information.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Andrea, what would you like the audience to take away from this webinar today?
Yeah, I hope they felt that they got a lot out of it, and they gained a better understanding of kind of our healthcare industry and the biopharma industry, especially as you've mentioned, you know, we are part of, not necessarily in certain aspects, but the front line, and how we've adapted to change and how our companies help support. And I would say, you know, kind of what Paul said is sure, you can come with a resume that's full of great things, and but if you're being your best each day, that's what's gonna represent you when you sit in front of an interview, of who you, and hold true to yourself of who you really are. I mean, you can have a list of things, but if you're not being honest of who you are or what you wanna do, and that would be the other thing too, really, when you look into something, do the research so you know you're going to enjoy it, because you don't want to get into something you think you have to do because of what you majored in or you think you want to do. Make sure that you really understand it and that you're passionate towards it, because that'll be expressed in an interview when you're passionate towards the process. So I would just say, you know, those are probably the key things: is be yourself and be honest, and again, prepared, like Mara said, you know, make sure that treat any interaction with anybody through the interview process as if it's, you know, your first impression and your last impression, and make sure that you continue to network and utilize those opportunities when you can use the social media to help navigate through that.
All right. Well, thank you. And with that, I'm officially ending the after party. Thank you so much for staying on a little later just to have this extended conversation with me and to share a little more information with our panelists and people who had to log off earlier. You know, they'll get the recording. And we'll also make these available on our website and promote them, so even people will be able to access these recordings for future, you know, education and support as they prepare for our upcoming fall recruitment and career fairs and interviews and networking events. So this is great. This is going to help people get some insight into this sector, this industry. And I'm just so thankful that all of you were available to participate today. It's great to have a panel on you as employer partners. You know, Humana has been great, Pfizer, and now bringing, you know, Paul into the fold with Merck. So it's my first time collaborating with Merck. I'm just looking forward to these future collaborations. So thank you again, and we'll be doing this again very soon, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Great to meet y'all. Have a good one.
Hey, you too.